Welcome to Soulful. Whether you're navigating challenges or celebrating victories,
We're here to remind you that every step on your path is meaningful. I'm Tiff.
and I'm Jess.
So let's clear our mind as we fill our soul. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Soulful. Jess and I are here mixing things up this week. Really excited to try on a new format for Size, and that is we have a guest. Do you want to say hi, Sam?
Hello. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Sam is one of my fellow coaches in the coaching world. We were in a program together and we had a coffee one day and she was talking a lot about her passions and the work that she does, and I was so lit up by it that I went back to Jess and I was like, we need to have her on the show. So this is Sam. For those of you who don't know her, Sam is a registered dietitian. She is a certified intuitive eating counselor and a body image coach. So lots of chops over here. We're privileged to share some space with you. So she's
Thank
doing a
you.
lot of amazing work in the realms of helping women heal their relationships with food and their bodies using the principles of intuitive eating. So really excited. We're going to get into a great conversation today. But Sam, I just wanted to give
Yay.
you a moment to kind of talk a little bit about your work, like kind of what led you into this type of work, or yeah, just your passion.
Sure. Yeah, it's a big question, that one, always. But to keep it relatively, short and summarized, I've been interested in the world of nutrition for a long time. However, wasn't always maybe for the right reasons. And I know that's a big part of the conversation you and I had, Tiffany, over our
Yeah.
coffee chat. Didn't realize it at the time, but you grew up struggling with disordered eating. I know we'll talk about, this in detail today. And with that comes a natural kind of interest in nutrition and honestly, working as hard as I could to stay in a body size that was accepted by society. And with that came a lot of challenges with food and
Mm.
self-worth as well. But it led me to becoming a registered dietitian. An interesting fact that happens a lot with registered dietitians is kind of they come from a space of feeling like they have an interest, but really it stems from a challenging relationship with food.
Mm.
And so I really discovered that during that journey. And I started working one on one with clients and doing the whole counseling piece and recognized that I didn't quite have the tools. And also that I was faced with kind of a mirror of what I was experiencing myself, which was this whole, challenging relationship with food and body. And so then began this additional continuing education, additional work in the area so that I could
Mm.
show up for my clients by showing up for myself and doing that healing work. And I've been on that journey for about 8 years, I would say, at this point, in terms of healing. And I've done a lot of work about and just learning about this space and how I can show up for my clients in a way that really, truly serves them instead of just suggesting eating more fruits and vegetables and stepping on the scale, because we know that that doesn't really serve people in the world long term, right? So yeah, and that's kind of what brought me here. So now I do the coaching thing. I became an intuitive eating counselor, and the intuitive eating principles have really allowed me to show up for my clients in a way that's inclusive and trauma informed too. And yeah, beautiful thing. So here I
Love,
am.
love that. Love the connection to like your own journey. And I feel like when you're
Yeah,
talking about that, reminds me of like therapist coaches too. They kind of get into the work for same thing. It's like, oh, there was
yeah.
something inside, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. So I can appreciate that. For those listening, just in case they're not aware, could you just give us like a quick sum up of what intuitive eating means?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it, again, is a hard one to answer. But basically, it's a self care framework. It was created by Evelyn Tribole, who is a registered dietitian as well, and Elise Resch. And it's 10 different principles. And it's this whole world and idea that we basically lose the ability to listen to our body's cues when it comes to nourishment, and that our body knows how much that we need to eat, when we need to stop, what types of foods, if we feel would serve us best in that moment, would nourish us best. But what happens is our upbringing, the world of diet culture really influences our relationship with food. And so what intuitive eating does is it uses its principles to really bring us back to a space where we can listen truly to our own individual needs again, instead of using external measures and rules to determine what we should or shouldn't be doing when it comes to eating. And with that comes the world of body image too, because it's very hard to work on your relationship with food and to incorporate these principles into your world when there's a really real true barrier there, which is that I'm afraid to step into this food freedom and flexibility and to really listen to myself and to let go of that control because of how I feel about myself and my body. So it incorporates all of that, and it is a challenging thing to explain when you haven't experienced it, but I hope I did an okay job there and gave it a bit of justice. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it makes perfect sense to me, and how they link entirely together. And we're going to get into that like societal piece, right? Like you're talking about the external measures. We're going to get into that for sure, because I think most of us were raised on diet culture, I think, and
absolutely.
And that conditioning is hardwired. But okay, well, thank you, Sam. So I wanted to share, what's been interesting for me. It's not, as Sam and I had that conversation before, I'm not personally new to working on body image and food things, having an eating disorder past, but when I broke my wrist, and yes, I'm still talking about my wrist for those listening, when I broke, yeah, exactly. I promise this is the last time, but no, when I broke my wrist, I had sheer panic come up in my body when I was like, oh no, I need to record a podcast. Like, I can't put on any makeup. I can't get ready. Like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, haven't I worked on this? And yes, the answer is yes, I have. But some of those things run deep. And I was able to sit back and kind of look at that again. And so that got me thinking a little bit about all of this, the body image. I brought it up to Jess, and Jess was like, yeah, I think we should totally do an episode on that, because it's so it impacts so many people. So I was like thinking about that, and I'm like, I want to go to the people. I want to go out and I want to like find out from them, like, what is it, the challenges you deal with? So I'm going to read out the top themes. 15, 16 people, I can't remember how many I chatted with, but women, all women in specific. But the themes that kind of came out were very interesting around some of the challenges that they had with their body image or where they feel right now. And so I'm just going to kind of read what they were. And the first one being self-worth tied to their appearance. And they logically know that this is not true, but also can't believe it for themselves, so to speak. The next point is body image acceptance really fluctuates depending on emotional and mental well-being. And I personally really resonated with that, because that's something I learned when in my earlier days of treatment. Like, if you're very dysregulated and you're not feeling good, like, it's not your body's fault. And like to not take it out in that way. But anyway, so that was another theme. Another one was that the early conditioning has such a lasting impact on daily life. The conditioning around food and body, that is, and social media is reinforcing insecurities a lot of the time, which I totally understand that as well. And then the last one is a really strong desire for change and to have this self-acceptance, but feeling really stuck. Like, I have no idea how to shift from where I am to where I want to be. And so like almost in a state of frustration with that. Yeah. So as I read the list to both of you, does anything jump out at you? I felt like I could relate to all of them from what the other women shared.
Yeah, I was getting goosebumps as you were talking about those, because it's what I see time and time again, and those specific patterns with my clients. And I see a lot of it just as you do in myself as well in the past, but still to this day, because these things, and we'll talk about this, but they not only run deep, but it's very challenging to get to a place where they don't exist at all anymore. And I think a lot of us put that pressure on ourselves to get to a place of this beautiful world of body positivity and self-acceptance. And the question is really like, does that truly exist? And if it does, might it look different than maybe we think it looks, or how it's perceived on social media or shown on social media too? But that first point specifically stuck out to me that you mentioned. That's what gave me chills when you said they what was the first point? You
Self-worth tied to appearance. They logically know that that's not true, but
logically
can't believe it.
Yeah, the amount of times that I say that is like, I know logically you know that you are worthy of love, or worthy of respect, or whatever it might be, worthy of food, but subconsciously I know that there's a lot of feelings there, that still exists, and both can be true at once. So that conversation comes up constantly. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think too, like as you're reading out the list, and I think all of those things, I think I just echoed that. Yeah, you hear something, you're like, oh yeah, I've also experienced that. I've also thought that, right? And so I think it's just really meaningful to be able to have a conversation that I think is also not talked about in this way all of the time. Body image is like one of those things, I think sometimes that, we all kind of feel it and hang on to it, or like we have different ways that we interpret it. But we don't always like tell people that, right? And we don't always open up the dialogue around it. So I just really, I appreciate this conversation. I think one of the biggest things that stuck it to me in those like themes, well, first is like the conditioning part, early conditioning, right? I think that's a huge theme, I guess, that really stuck out. But as well as like the fluctuation of like, when I feel good, body image is not something that like maybe is like on my radar. But then when I'm in a place of like sadness or anger, or like some of those like really deep intense emotions, I'm harder on my body image because of that. It's like a completely reason. It's not like, it's not because of my body, but for something other reason, then all of a sudden I just like make it about that, so
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. And I see that a lot in my clients as well, for sure, is on harder days that everything's harder, including how we feel in our body. And there are ways, definitely like more tangible ways, I guess, that we can show up for ourselves on those days that can help decrease that those internal feelings and stressors during that time. And so that can be really valuable to learn about as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm not even gonna lie. Like before I jumped on this call to record this, I was feeling nervous. We're doing a 3 dynamic, that we don't normally do. And I said I was with my coach before this recording. And I was like, here I am. I was like, I'm so dysregulated. I'm like, my body dysmorphia has gone just out the like it's so. But I remember in early days of treatment, we would come in and I did not have a lot of connection to my feelings at that time, but we would come in and they were like, well, how do you feel? I'm like, well, I feel fat. They're like, fat isn't a feeling, Tiffany. Like,
period.
It's not a feeling. I'm like, well, because I couldn't tap into some of those emotional pieces of what I was actually feeling at that time. Whereas now, like, I guess even just the shift in awareness, it's like, I know that I'm doing this because I feel this way. So let me calm my nervous system. But anyway. We will get into those tangible tips. I'm excited for that. But yeah, we kind of did touch on the conditioning piece, and I think we are just like inundated, like from such a young age. I'm sure it happens for women and men, and just kind of everybody's impacted. But something that, in my earlier stages with working through some of these things is like, I didn't realize how much, and you talked about the subconscious, Sam, but like how much I had internalized. And so I'm just curious about the question of like, how does this conditioning, and this can be opened up to both of you, but how does this conditioning show up in our daily lives without like even realizing? Like it's like always kind of playing in the background a little bit. And how is that like showing up in impact, I know how it looked for me, but I'd like to hear from you both.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And what I've noticed, I think, is that everybody has their own unique journey with the conditioning, for sure. But that if you were to sit, all these women, let's say, if we're just focusing on women right now in a room and they all discuss their journeys, it would all come down to this conditioning and really diet culture, this $72 billion industry that it
Mm,
surrounds us, which we see in other areas too. So, for example, like how we're brought up in our home, if our the beginning stages of how we feel about ourselves stems from for sometimes we're lucky enough to live in a home where our parents or our moms or our grandparents don't comment on our bodies, or they don't they aren't dieting and they aren't involved in diet culture. That's very lucky if that does happen, but for most people it starts very early. But really, if we think about the main culprit, okay, why does mom feel that way, why do my grandparents feel that way? Well, it really stems from this bigger world of diet culture that surrounds all of us. And I think when we think of diet culture, oftentimes we think of like diet programs or like, like cutting calories or maybe sometimes social media, but I think it's so much bigger than that and in
yeah.
a way we don't realize. And even if you're not brought up with it, if you're lucky enough, unfortunately, once you get out in the world, it will still get you. It will still impact you because it just truly is
Yeah.
ingrained in so many things and is seen and normalized as okay, and is intertwined with health too. And I think that really complicates it. Health and wellness, it's like you should be doing this for your
Yes.
health or to be well, and then you feel bad, right, when you're not conforming to all these things that are actually quite toxic, right, for us. So one thing that comes up for me a lot of the time, um, when I think about conditioning, I think there's the more obvious things like social media is all around us, and so many of us are just, of course, scrolling and not realizing how we're internalizing all this
Yes.
information. Sure, that's definitely a more obvious one. I think back, maybe 20 years or something too, it was a lot about like the magazines and like the definitely still the celebrity culture too. And now like on Facebook and Instagram, sometimes it's the before and after pictures, and it's seeing all the validation that people get and the
Mm,
celebration when they lose weight or when their body has changes, good for you, keep going, like fire emojis, hearts, like whatever it is. And we all want to feel that as humans. But some of the more sneakier types of diet culture that I've seen that really stick out to me are like in the media, when you think about the people living, like let's say the person in the movie who lives in a larger body, how are they portrayed in that movie if you think about it? Oftentimes they're maybe the funny one, maybe they're the one who
mm,
doesn't get into the relationship because they're living in a larger body or they're made fun of or they're XYZ, right? And so even though they're not blatantly saying like, um it's not connected to like dieting, let's say, we're still internalizing that as fat is bad, or internalizing that as I am unlovable, or I am, I can only be the funny person, but I'm not the popular person, if or I'm not a person that can fit in, if I live in a larger body. And so there's these sneaky things too that we don't think about
yeah.
that we're just taking in, and life's going on. And like I said, even if you are lucky enough to grow up in a home where you're not impacted, it'll get you out and about, even in doctors' offices too, in the world of weight stigma and in our healthcare. Unfortunately, it's everywhere, and we could talk about this for forever because it's that prevalent. It's that prevalent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking about like the first thing diet, like the first thing I brought back was like, what was that program called? Like Weight Watchers, like what, but there was another like
Oh yeah.
Atkins or like
Yep.
Like these programs that just like and I mean, I know for me, I was young. Like I was young when you
Yep.
start hearing about these things or the ads on
Hmm.
TV or,
Hmm.
all of that stuff. So, yeah, just really interesting to hear. And I think like, so for me, like I kind of have a little bit of as you guys were like talking and Tiffany, when you asked the question about conditioning, something came to my mind, and it's the first time I ever thought of it. So it could be a half thought, it could be a full thought. We'll see where it goes. But for me, like being someone who has lived my whole life in a bigger body, the conditioning around, and I do appreciate the movement of like body positivity and all
Hmm.
of these things that you see specifically on social media. One
Hmm.
of the things is though about conditioning is like being someone in a bigger body, it's almost like you're conditioned then to be accepted of that. And I don't mean accepted of like, because of course we all deserve to be accepted in our bodies, no matter, what they look like or what stage we are or whatever. But it's like if I'm living in a bigger body and I don't feel like that confident person that's, on
Hmm.
Instagram with like 300,000 followers who is getting all of these like, great messages and trying to like really pave the way. There's like another added layer of that as well, right? Because the truth is that yeah, all people in bigger bodies don't feel that way, and they don't have the following, I guess, or they don't maybe, yeah, there's a lot of different factors I think that plays into that. But it was one of the things that came to my mind as I was listening to you talk, Sam, is specifically around, the social media kind of influence that we have, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It's big, it's intense, and it's not, you're right. Like the body positive movement exists more now than it did, I think, in the 90s. And we're getting somewhere, but in some ways we're not. Because if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying like there's this expectation that if you're living in a larger body to just embrace it and to accept it and to be in that space, but it's not always that easy, as we know.
Yeah, and I think I'm not going to say most, some of the bigger
Yeah.
bodied people who I see in these spaces or who are advocating for people in bigger bodies really are still kind of um, societally accepted in a bit. So they're not like,
Mm-hmm.
their body still is like very uh, yeah, it still is seems to be more socially accepted as a bigger
I know exactly
person
what you're
who
talking about.
could
Mm-hmm.
be different than yeah, like smaller bodies. But yeah, it's just interesting to see that those there's still an influence, right? There's still a level of acceptance and different levels even in those spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. That actually I had a conversation. So of all the women I interviewed, and I'm not going to name her, but shout out to you, this person, you'll know who I'm talking about. I had this conversation with so many women, and she was the only one who came back to me and she's like, do you think about your body image? She's like, I don't own makeup. Like, I don't, she was like, she was
Mm.
like, it literally it's not a passing thought through my mind that I need to go back and check the mirror and see how I look or anything like that. And I was like, that's fascinating to me. Like
Whoa.
that is fascinating. I said, I can't say that I relate to you, you know? But to come back, so she was talking about that, and then she was talking about the body positivity movement, and she said, I think in a lot of ways it harms us further. And I've just been thinking about this a lot, so I'm just riffing off of you here, Jess. But that body positivity movement, she's like, now it's like, oh, we're supposed to feel good and confident and
Mm.
in our
Mm-hmm.
bodies. And so now there is this other pressure, and also still underneath that, if you go and scroll the comments and stuff,
Mm.
you still see the trolls, you still see the people saying
Yeah.
the negative things, and even for somebody who's trying to embrace that confidence. So
Yeah.
anyway, it just made me think about things a little bit different. But yeah, I was also thinking about too how the actress that keeps coming up as you were talking, Sam, as you both were talking, is Amy Schumer. I don't know if either of you are
Mm.
familiar, comedian actress Amy Schumer, but she makes fun of her weight in all the things like, and what you're talking about being in a bigger body, then she's the funny one, Sam, you were mentioning in the like in a lot of
Mhm.
her movies, that's what she does, is she's making fun of how she looks. And if you watch her stand up, she's making fun of how she looks, and like she's gotten acceptance for that, but she's still like very derogatory. So anyway, I was just thinking about that too. How some of those conditionings run in a sneakier way, to use your words, sneakier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. And that stuff is can even be complicated too because there's two thoughts I have coming up. So I want I want to make sure I touch on both of them. The first one is that what you're saying is complicated too because I've worked with people in all body sizes when it comes to the area of body image. And one of the things that I've heard a couple of times is that sometimes it feels easier and safer to acknowledge
Hmm.
like living in a bigger body. And even Amy Schumer, like going back to what Jess said, she's not necessarily in like there's different types of like body sizes that people would consider maybe like plus size or not, right? There's all these interpretations of what is truly like a larger body or not. But you're right, she always brings up her body and makes fun of it because maybe she's not in the most ideal body size for a
Yeah.
woman. But yeah, like this can be also like a bit of a protection mechanism too, of like if I call it out and if I'm making fun of it, then I won't be made fun of as much, or I will feel safer because I'm kind of calling it out that it's there, which is so interesting. And
Yeah.
I've heard that a few times from my clients. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah, something I wanted to mention. And then the other piece was the you mentioned body positivity and it bringing up like additional pressures and challenges. And I think that's so true. And this is why I teach from a space of body neutrality. And body neutrality to me is it's super important to teach and to show up for my clients in a way that reflects this rather than maybe the body positivity space. And I think it's because it's very, very challenging for people if they're I would say there's like a scale, right? And if they're here when it comes to their relationship with their body, on they're struggling with their self-worth and they've never really been kind to their body and they're struggling with eating, etc. And they're expecting themselves to get to a place of beautiful place of acceptance where they can look in the mirror and they like love themselves and they don't care about the comments and they just show up and wear whatever they want. Like that's a huge jump, right? And that's definitely not going to feel safe to the nervous system.
Yeah.
And so to feel like and expect ourselves to get to that place, I think is for many or most, I would even say, is unrealistic in our society. So body neutrality is kind of that middle zone where it's like I might not love my body. I might not be, obsessed with the way I look and I'm, comfortable wearing everything and I'm showing up in every space confidently. Maybe that's not the expectation, but maybe I could get to a space where my body doesn't hold me back from joy and showing up for things and events, in a way that feels good for me. And maybe I can get to a place where I can eat and not feel bad, right? And to really nourish
Mm.
myself and choose nourishment. And maybe I can get to a place where I'm not beating myself up in the mirror all the time and I'm wearing comfortable clothing because I deserve that. Like this is this neutral space where you're
Love
showing
that.
up in a way yeah, that's more neutral, not love, but we're not being, unkind to ourselves either. And we're respecting ourselves and living life anyway.
Hmm. Yeah. The neutrality, you said something, I can't quote the exact line, but it's like, so that my body's not holding me back from joy or something like that. That was very
Yeah.
impactful. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's
'Cause-
true.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
thinking about myself in the past and even present, or like people I talk to, like, oh, I can't do that because I look this way, or I can't show up in that outfit, or
Yeah.
I can't. And like, why does that matter? I know why there's a lot of
Mhm.
internal things going on, but like in the grand scheme, yeah, we're taking away joy. Anyway, that was very, very impactful.
Yeah,
Body.
and I guess I was just, yeah, listen, neutrality versus acceptance. And yeah, I know Tiff already knows this, but I talk about being neutral in a lot of a lot of spaces.
Yeah.
And so I really like that language. And I guess my question could be to you, Sam, like knowing that this is like the work you do and the conversations that you have lots, like when we think about body neutrality versus acceptance, are like the steps like, does it look the same, I guess, like with the
Mm,
implementation of trying to develop the neutrality versus acceptance? Like, does it look the same? Is it a little bit different in like the theory
yeah.
part or in the practice part? Like, I'd just be curious to hear more like about that.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great question. Yeah. It kind of goes back to that scale, and definitely I would say it looks different for
Mhm.
sure. And similar in some ways too. So I'll try to explain
Mhm.
that as best I can. Neutrality is really this place in the middle, right? And you mentioned acceptance a few times. Acceptance would be part of an extension of neutrality, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, a little bit further along, I'd say. And actually, to get to a place of acceptance, there's something called the body grief scale, where there are multiple stages to get to a place of acceptance. And within that acceptance lives neutrality too. So it's kind of like that combination. And then there's positivity, which is kind of that space of like showing up, like I have mentioned, like super confident and like that doesn't care what anybody thinks. And like that's where it's really hard, for people to get to. But acceptance is kind of that in between stage, and this takes a while to get to. And so we would approach it like from a on the back end, I guess, in a similar way. And I will always say to people, it's possible that eventually over time, when you continue to show up for yourself and you continue to challenge those internal beliefs that you have in terms of self-worth, and you kind of find yourself again through clothing and feeling comfortable, and you kind of take away this pressure, it is possible that eventually over time throughout the years, you could get to a place, if you continue to show up for yourself, where you feel that true sense of freedom and confidence, and are in that space that some people truly do live in, right? Of body positivity. But let's not put the pressure on it,
Hmm.
and let's pull that back, and let's instead work on getting to a place of neutrality first. And then if over time, if working from that space of neutrality, you get to a place of, you know, um, positivity, or just a little bit higher, I guess, in terms of how you feel, then awesome. But let's take the pressure off, because it's okay if you don't too, and we can still experience joy from neutrality or from acceptance too. So there's kind of those different stages, and I think people live in different spaces even when they're in a bigger body, and it's all possible, but everybody's experience will be a little bit different. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense to me for sure. I mean, I think just helpful to like hear about, and I really like that approach of like, yeah, we're all like all the way back here, and we don't have to be like, all the way over here and like overnight
No,
kind of thing.
it's
We
not
talk about
fair to
exactly, it's
expect
very
that.
unrealistic, right? To
Mm-hmm.
expect that of ourselves, and then in like cue the shame, the guilt, like all of the other
Exactly, the
stuff that
failure
ties into it.
mentality. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
you got it.
Hmm. And the body grief, that's interesting. I've never heard that term before. Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I follow somebody, her name's Body Image with Brie, like on Instagram, and I do a lot of workshops with her because I find her work like very empowering. And she works in like the world of counseling and body image specifically, and this whole world of body grief. And that term sits well with some people. Some people really resonate it. Not everybody resonates with it. Grief is it's a big word, right? It
Yeah.
holds a lot of different meaning for different people. But I've found that it resonates a lot with many of my clients, and obviously with her clients too. And yeah, there's these really interesting stages that kind of people go through on their body image journey. And it kind of starts with this world of feeling. I'm actually gonna. Would you guys be interested if I named the stages?
Yeah,
Because
totally.
I think they are really interesting. I was looking at them there.
I would
While
love.
you're grabbing that, Sam, one of the
Sure.
things that was interesting when I heard you say that was and now it makes sense when you talked about this person being in the counseling world, because as an addictions counselor we say the same thing about addiction, right? Like, we're grieving
Mm,
something that people are is perceived as a bad thing, right? A negative thing, the things that holds us
yep.
back, blah, et cetera, et cetera. But there is still a grieving process that comes with that, right? And
Yes,
so
exactly.
yeah, I think it's just really interesting to see it paralleled in this like world of body image. So yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what those stages look like.
Yeah. Exactly. It really is a grieving process, and a lot of people don't think of it that way, which is
Mm.
fair, right? A lot of time we're not consciously aware of what's really going
Yeah.
on behind the scenes. So the first stage, yeah, is denial. So it's kind of this world of like, I'm like not willing to accept this, like there's got to be a way that I can make my body smaller and stay in that size and be happy and find happiness from that. And so we go through those feelings to kind of summarize. And then from there, we start to have these conversations, maybe with a therapist, maybe with a dietitian who specializes in this area. And we recognize, over time that maybe we can't, maybe we're genetically kind of made to be in a certain shape and size. And maybe when we truly show up for ourselves, and when we eat in a way that serves us, when we move in a way that serves us, when we take care of our mental health and sleep properly, maybe our body isn't what we expected. And so we might feel these feelings of shame and anger might come up.
Mm.
From there, there's something called the bargaining stage. And I did a whole workshop on that. It was so interesting, where it's this kind of back and forth between like, I know that this is true, but I'm just gonna try anyway. And that's when diet culture starts to creep in again. And you kind of find these sneaky reasons, right, to try to make your body smaller, and to begin maybe restrictive practices again, or disordered practices. Because to me, what I hear is like your internal protectors are like red flag, like alert, like this is scary that we're about to give this up and get to a
Yeah.
place where we might actually stop trying to control everything that we're doing and just let ourselves live in a larger body, or in a body that we're not fully comfortable with. So we get in this bargaining phase. Depression or low moods kind of comes after that, where there's a lot of sadness that comes with this grief. And finally, once we move through all the emotions and show up for ourselves in a kind of compassionate way, and we can get to a place of acceptance. And of course, this takes time, as you could
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah. So those are the stages. Really interesting.
That is fascinating, actually.
Yep.
The good old dabda, we
Yeah.
named the stages of grief, dabda. But
Mm.
I think Tiff, we actually talked about this a couple of episodes ago,
We
right? With
did.
like the grief and this process. And I think one of the things is like when we draw it out, and this is how I've learned it, and I'm sure probably many others have learned it this way, but you see it like you kind of come in on one side and then you have to go through these like the deeper stuff. So the bargaining, you come up to depression, and finally acceptance is on the other end. And oftentimes it's like it's drawn that way, or it's explained that way, and it's like the acceptance is like like the moment where
Yeah.
everybody just like wants to be, and like you just want to get over
Mhm.
there. And then all of a sudden when we go back to the anger phase, we're not like understanding, because like, wait a second, we've already did that. And so to see kind of it as like a
Mm,
continuum, right? Like just because we can
absolutely.
get to that, like more on that side of like acceptance or neutrality, like working through toward the neutrality, doesn't necessarily mean that, yeah, next week when I go to try on a dress that I was going to wear to this event, it doesn't fit or
Yeah.
whatever, it doesn't look the way I thought it was, and I don't get angry at that in those
Yeah.
moments, right? So
Yeah.
just really appreciating the different stages, and that yeah, it's just kind of like a continuum, right?
Yes. Healing journey is not linear, as we
Yeah.
know. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you guys talk about that
Mm-hmm.
all the time, and I
Yep.
love that point. You're so right. Sometimes with body image, it is about surviving actually the moment, which is maybe there's a wedding that comes up or something, and you're terrified to see people you went to high school with because your body's changed and you don't know what to wear, and you don't feel comfortable in your skin, and it's a big deal. And we go back to that anger stage all of a sudden, even though we were in acceptance when we were at home and with our family and felt comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's,
Mm.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think it's a super good point too, because I know how I think. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but it's like my whole journey has been like I want to get to the moment, and I want to stay there. And so I think
Yeah.
this is a super valid part of the conversation, so that like it normalizes and humanizes kind of
Yeah.
that real the realness of journeying through some of these things. The bargaining I
Yeah.
found super interesting because I've definitely found myself in the bargaining a lot around the body
Same.
image. Yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
Cool to hear it laid out that way. I'm realizing we still have a little bit of time here. So one of the we've touched on so many like awesome points here so far. But before we kind of get into the last little bit of practical tips and stuff, considering this was the one thing that was across the board for all the women, and we've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to kind of talk about maybe some of the barriers. So the whole piece around self-worth isn't tied to our appearance, but why is it so hard to embody it? Now, we did kind of talk about some of those things, but what are some of those actual barriers that are really hard to move from self-criticism to self-acceptance? Like, because like we just kind of talked about some of that, like the grief is there in the mix, but like what else is playing in for a lot of women when or
Hmm.
humans, let me say humans, because it doesn't just extend to women, I recognize. So
Yeah.
yeah, just
Yep.
curious about that part.
Oof, there's a lot,
Okay.
unfortunately. I can talk about some of the ones that come up most often that are very prevalent, and a huge barrier. And some of it's a bit controversial too, but one would be the world of weight stigma in healthcare. Being, going to the doctor for one thing and being told, have you ever thought about losing weight? Or that being, when you live in a larger body, the first form of treatment, when really maybe that's making everything worse, because then we're doing the restrictive practices and that's really hard on our body, and we know that that's not sustainable, and then we're failing at, quote unquote, failing at it, and then we're hard on ourselves, and that's perpetuating all of the self-esteem stuff, and we're stuck in this, I just can't do it, I don't have enough willpower, I'm not good enough, and then it makes all the not good enough feelings worse, and it's like maybe we could have treated this from a more inclusive lens.
Hmm.
um, and I see this a lot because I have so many women come to me and say, but I can't accept, I can't work on acceptance, or I don't want to because I'm not healthy. And I often will have the conversation of like challenging it, which is a very hard conversation to have, especially when the feelings are very real and when we're hearing this from somebody we respect, like a physician, right? And I have the conversation of, is that true? Right? Is it true that you are unhealthy because of your body sizes, or is there more things that we can work on? Are there other things that we can work on
Hmm.
that don't have to do with the number on the scale to help when it comes to whatever you're experiencing, the health conditions you're experiencing, or how you're feeling internally? Can we work on that in a way that's more inclusive and safer for you, basically? That's one that I
Yeah,
see often. Um,
that's a big
big
one.
big topic, political
Yeah.
topic a little bit too. Like it's we talk about stigma in a lot of ways. We don't talk about weight stigma as much. It's not as normalized as like a stigma, but it exists and it's real and it's everywhere. And so yeah. And then
Yeah.
the other piece to me is this whole world of like social media and comparison and trends, and there not being the same accessibility to like clothing, for example, for everybody in all different body shapes and sizes. And
Mm.
that doesn't feel very good when, and I'm completely honest, I'm very open. I've had to have many conversations about my own privilege and my own body. I do live within privilege. I'm in a straight size body. I'm very aware of that. And so I don't live with this, but I see this over and over again with my clients where they cannot walk into a store and find something that suits their own personality, so they can show up as their authentic selves and be comfortable, or maybe nothing
Mm.
fits them. And so now, they don't feel comfortable to show up as themselves, and of course they're coming to me or to anybody saying, I need to lose weight because I'm uncomfortable, and I feel unattractive, and I feel like I don't fit in
Yeah.
XYZ. Yeah. Those are
Yeah.
two barriers out of many.
Big ones though.
Big ones. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I was thinking like in terms of barriers too, I think like well, and yeah, we have touched on a lot of that, comparisons. I think lack of like role models as well, like especially if we
Ooh, yes.
are older, not old, just older. But and when this diet culture, like the movement of body positivity, I guess, wasn't kind of like in everyone's eyes and ears. So I think that's a barrier. And the other thing I would say is like really like our, and I know Tiff, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, but like just unresolved trauma, unresolved
Yes.
wounds, like the emotional
Yes.
barrier that comes with body acceptance, I think is huge, right? If we don't take the
Yeah.
time to, focus on
Yeah.
that unresolved whatever we have within us, it becomes really hard to focus on some of this body image and like even to move to a place of neutrality, let alone,
Yeah.
acceptance, right? So I think
Yeah.
that also is a huge barrier for some people, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not everybody has the resources, the space to
Mhm.
do that work.
That's
And
right.
that is so, so, so true. That's such a great point. And the role modeling, absolutely. Certain generations as well, definitely.
Mhm.
Um, yep,
Yeah.
really important points.
Those are all some really big things too that have been named here. So like just sending out compassion to anybody
Yeah,
wherever you are on that part of your journey with it, because yeah, there's a lot of, it's not like it's easy. Like in my mind, I think body image, the next thing that comes up, it's Sam, you already kind of talked about it, like the obvious thing that jumps out is social media. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm
yeah,
comparing myself here and this, but there is so much more depth and layers that go way beyond just like those visual cues that we take in too. So really appreciating that right now, in listening to some of those barriers. But with all of this, because this is all great, like good that like to unpack some of the layers, because Sam, I can just feel all
yeah.
your wisdom and knowledge in this area. I'm sure you have
Oh, thanks.
hours more you could share with us. But in kind of winding down the conversation a little bit here today, just what would be some practical tips or a good place to start to help shifting from to a place of more maybe body neutrality, or like to work your
Yeah.
way along that scale, so to speak? Yeah, what would that look like?
Yeah, it's such a great question because all this is so heavy, right? And so it's like, okay, this exists, I live with it. It's, common, but where do I go from here? Yeah.
Exactly.
And as we just spoke to about, we don't always have the resources to do a lot of that inner work, or the emotional, space or bandwidth either. And that's a very real thing too. So with body image, yeah, there's a couple of different like areas of working on body image. One of them is the internal world, which is kind of that healing that trauma and visiting that trauma and showing up for yourself in a more compassionate way and looking at those protectors that we have and that exists and why are they there and how can we support them, and that's the heavy work. And with that, one of the things we can do right away is start to listen a little bit. What is your internal soundtrack? I generally call it sound like when it comes to body image. Can we turn the volume up on that a little bit if it feels safe, right? To do so. And if you have the space to do so, can we turn the volume up on that a little bit and notice like what is the tone here when it comes to the way we're talking about
Mm,
ourselves? And oftentimes we'll notice that it's a lot harsher than we realize. And unfortunately, like a lot of it is so subconscious that we don't even realize that that is the background dialogue or soundtrack that's happening. So that would be, when it comes to that side of body image, something we could do kind of right away. But when it comes to the more, I'd say like tangible steps or practical side of the body image world, which also exists, there's are some real practical things that we can do. And especially great for people who don't maybe have that extra space for all that other deeper work right now.
right.
So one of the things would be social media, especially if you're somebody who's on social media, if you are, somebody who's scrolling, maybe you've had your same social media for a really long time too. Um, of course, there's more of the obvious, which would be more of like a cleanse, a social media cleanse, which looks like really going in and asking yourself, first of all, am I coming off of my social media feeling at least neutral, if not positive, but neutral, right? And if the answer is no, then why? Like, what am I seeing? What am I taking in? That's
Mm,
making me feel that way. And so I understand that sometimes it's hard to get rid of, right, people who have been a part of your world, and maybe it's uncomfortable and maybe you can't um, do that, but maybe we can get to a space where we're muting people that aren't a huge part of our life, that make us feel like a lot of big feelings of comparison or just uncomfortable in general. Muting is an option. You don't have to get rid of them. And if that's uncomfortable or not, doesn't feel realistic, then can we look at adding in pages that feel really good so that we have more of that on our For You page as well here too? So that would be like, for me, it looks different for everybody. For me, it would be pages that give a lot of like positivity, and that are colorful, and that like have nice messaging, and that are encouraging. And there's spaces specifically in body image that offer this too, and so they're more body image specific. Body diversity too on social media is really important. So if you looked at your page, what is it? Is it all, women or men who are looking? Maybe you followed like fitness accounts over the years, or maybe you followed weight loss, recipe accounts, and it's all you're seeing is thin women or all celebrities, let's say. And how is that subconsciously impacting how you feel about yourself? And so can we add some diversity here? Can we add some women in larger bodies who are enjoying their life and are happy, or maybe that are speaking on their truth and how they feel, and could that be helpful? So social media, adding on in a way that feels good, getting to a place of coming off and feeling at least neutral is important. Spending less time in the mirror can be helpful. How many mirrors do you have in your house, and where are they located, and how often are you spending in them? Some people avoid them entirely. Some people spend a lot of time body checking, and the more we're body checking, the harsher our inner dialogue oftentimes. And so are they all necessary all over the house, and how are they impacting you? And keeping a few around is okay. Obviously, sometimes we want to check ourselves out before we leave or something, and that's okay. But how are they truly impacting you, being real about that? Truly finding comfortable clothing, which I said can be a major barrier, but I will say it's when you can put on your clothes and feel comfy, and it's not picking at you, and you decide you deserve, clothes that feel comfortable on your body, and you're not picking at it, then you're less hyper fixated. That is the truth that we see.
Yeah. Buy
the jean size that fits, because you will spend less time focusing on your body. And does the number, truly matter when every store is so different anyway? We're probably 5 different jean sizes, right? It's ridiculous. And so, making it not mean so much about ourselves, that number, and choosing comfortable clothing anyway, whatever that means for you. And the last thing I would say is finding the joy in movement again can be really powerful. I know that this is also can be a barrier for people living in all types of bodies where they don't feel comfortable showing up, maybe at a gym, for example, which is totally fair. Even fear of being seen out in public for walking. Like, these are all real, true barriers. But I will say one thing that I notice is that my clients who get to a place where they feel comfortable and find something joyful when it comes to moving their body, no matter what the scale says, something about just getting up and moving a little bit and supporting our body in that way helps us to minimize the intensity of those body image feelings, I guess. It's just something that I notice within my clients, no matter, like I said, what body size they're in. I don't know if it's those endorphins or just the fact that we're moving and we're feeling, good, confident in that. But I notice a decrease in preoccupation around specific body size and number on the scale. So those are some.
So many good ones.
Good. It's important.
Yeah. I love that last one about movement, because when I rediscovered figure skating, that's exactly what that is like for me. It's like I don't have 2 thoughts about how my body looks when I'm on the ice. I'm not checking myself. I'm like, look at me move. I feel so good.
Yay. Nice.
I think the other one,
until you break your wrist.
Called out.
I was gonna say, I'm not talking about it anymore. Yes, until I break my wrist, which has made this season a little bit hard because I have only been on the ice once since, and that is my place to release. So I would say that that is definitely a good thing to find for ourselves, whatever that looks like for whoever's listening,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
And the mirror part was interesting. I would have thought like throw it the scale, but when you started talking about the mirror, I was like, so true, body checking. I felt a little called out there, but yeah, body checking. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The
Yeah, that's
scale.
actually, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Sam, sorry.
I was just going to say the scale is an interesting piece because yes, but also the scale's a bit more complex because it's a coping strategy for
Right.
some people. It's a very real one, so it can be very scary. So that's a hit or miss one. It's a hard one to just be like, get rid of it because it doesn't work for everybody, if that makes sense, right away. Anyway, definitely a long-term goal,
Yeah.
but yeah, not always like the fastest upfront thing. So glad you brought that up. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Jess.
Mhm.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, the mirror thing really, yeah, that really, I never thought about it before. So that was
Yeah.
interesting for sure. Um, I think so I think for me, like I I really go back to staying curious as well as being like, and I really appreciate the tips that you shared, Sam, in like a really practical kind of way. And so yeah, I really appreciated that. Like some of the things was just like, oh yeah, I could like do that right now. You know, I can log onto my
Right
Instagram,
now,
like do it right
exactly.
now.
Yeah.
And that really feels good. I think, yeah, like leaning into the stay curious, right? For me, like when I do feel and yeah, long history of like lots of body stuff over here for sure. But I think one of the things now that I really try to practice when some of that old inner dialogue comes up around body for me is really to stay curious and be like why is
Mm,
this happening, why did you just say that about your body, why is it
Yes.
does it feel this way. And I think yeah, it's just been really easy to like yeah, it's been easy to reel it back a little bit when I'm staying curious instead of critical, I guess.
yeah.
And then some
Love
yeah,
that.
daily things as well, right? So those like all of the things you were talking about remind me of like this holistic approach. I know we've used that word here,
Yeah.
right? It really talks about like yeah, fun, enjoying movement, and what that does is it helps your emotional wellness as well. And so everything is really just kind of tied together. So really appreciate that. And I just want to say thanks, Sam, for yeah, for
Yeah.
sharing all that you have. I've yeah, really appreciated hearing your perspective, knowing that you get the opportunity to talk to lots of people who are moving through this. And so yeah, I just really wanted to say thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. It's and the space to talk about it because it's a big topic, but definitely one that I have a lot of passion about. So I love any opportunity I get to have these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. Your passion shines through, like without a
Mhm.
Thank
doubt.
you.
I do know, like, a lot of people are really anticipating this episode coming out. So
Oh,
it'll
good.
be they'll be excited to tune in because it's
Mhm.
something this isn't my niche of where I work with individuals. I work with women specifically, but it is something that I see come up in a lot of clients as they're unpacking a lot of the other things that are going on for them that isn't my niche. But it definitely is a common thread. So I'm sure that they're all going to be very enriched by this and everybody who's tuning in. So Sam, with
Yeah.
that, I wanted to just, where can people go to learn more about you or to figure out if they can work
Mm.
with you? Where can they find you in the world? We'll link some of your socials, but yeah, just let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm from New Brunswick, Canada. I was saying that earlier, but I do all of my work virtually. So I work with people in all areas of the world. Some certain work I do, just provincially, but then I do other work like program work and some coaching work too in other areas too.
Cool.
Um, and you can find me on Instagram as selfcare_Sam. And then I have my website from there. I have some really, I believe, are helpful resources too, all free on my Instagram page under the link in my bio, and you'll find some really helpful free resources there too. Um, Give you a little bit more information on the type of work that I do and how I work with my clients. It's a great place to start as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you heard it here. That is where run over if this is calling you and you feel like this is somewhere you want to start digging in. Yeah, this is Sam. Sam is a wealth of knowledge. So just
Thanks.
just want to really thank you. Like Jess already said it beautifully, so I'm not going to repeat, but thank you for being here and sharing all of this with us because I've taken away so much and a few things I'm going to go Google after. So excited about
Awesome.
that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for everybody tuning in, it's been another awesome episode. Let us know if you enjoy having a third trio on with us, with me and Jess, because it brings a whole different dynamic that's been just lovely. So, yeah, looking forward to hearing what you think and where you're at in your body image journey, wherever that is. Just extending again that compassion and gentleness to wherever you are, because it is okay. Wherever you are, it is okay.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Until next time, everybody, stay soulful.
Thanks for tuning into Soulful. We hope you found something meaningful to carry with you on your journey. And if you enjoyed today's episode and want to show your support, we invite you to subscribe, share the podcast, and leave a review wherever you listen.
And if you're eager for more, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Soulful the Podcast for additional content and updates. Until next time, stay soulful.